Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Serge, and welcome to another episode of Search for the Truth. And our goal is to educate people, empower people so they can take in charge their health issues and feel better. And today I'm really excited to have my following guest, Miss Tricia. She's a bestseller author. She's an expert on emotional eating and addictive personality. So welcome to the show, Miss Tricia.
Well, thank you, Serge. Great to be here.
Thank you. First of all, tell us a little bit about you, why you have this, I would say, passion to help people with emotional eating.
Yeah, well, it really came from my own personal experience for sure, because I was an emotional eater and I, was by age 21, 50 pounds overweight on account of it. But I thought I just liked food. So I was not aware of being an emotional eater. But, I certainly was aware of being overweight, and that was really painful for me. Like, I was always going on a diet. I was always trying to lose the weight. I'd lose weight for a period of time, but I'd put it back on. And so I was really like what they call a yo-yo dieter. So I had like 5 different sizes of pants in my closet, and I never knew what size I was going to be, so I'd be like up 30, down 20, up 10, down 5, up 40, depending on what kind of stress I had in my life. So, I came to a point where I just was really tired of that yo-yoing and tired of hating my body and tired of, thinking about getting some disease where I automatically lost weight, or joining the army where they'd force me to exercise at boot camp. I mean, some pretty crazy thoughts, and I thought there's got to be a better way. And thankfully, I met somebody who was able to show me how to really deal with the underlying causes of why I felt driven to eat. Like, I just loved food. I loved to eat and cook and go out to dinner. And, I just thought about food way too much. Yeah. But by the grace of God, I was able to lose the weight and keep it off. And then I started really trying to understand what was it that was driving me, and how to show other people how to heal as well. And that's been my life's work for 30 plus years now.
Wow, fascinating. And you're right. I mean, food is good, right? But we don't realize what it can do to our body. So what do you mean exactly by emotional eating? We hear that all the time, but it seems that people don't really clearly know what it means.
Yeah, well, really, people think it's just when somebody breaks up with you, you eat Ben and Jerry's, but it's a little bit more than that. Or you love your grandmother's cookies and can't stop eating them. But it's really when we have a response to life, which is, when life stress happens and we use food to cope. Okay, so we use food for emotional reasons, not nutritional reasons. Like, we don't use food because it's good for our bodies, but we go beyond that. So we eat and then we overeat. We lose control when we eat. And it's really a spectrum. I've identified what I call the emotional eating spectrum, where on the low end is emotional eating, because I think most people can, emotionally eat. I think we're hardwired to have an emotional connection with food, starting at birth. When you breastfeed, you have that beautiful bond with your mother. So it's something that's natural, but anybody can indulge once in a while. But if somebody does it on a regular basis, they can really take it too far to where they're overeating, they're binging, perhaps they're a binge eater, they're eating super unhealthy foods. They don't have to be overweight to be an emotional eater, but definitely it's become an obsession and a compulsion. And then if they do it, overdo it to extent where they have a lot of consequences from it and very little control, then they get into the food addiction area of the spectrum. So to me, it's emotional eating is the spectrum, and the high end is food addiction. And that was me, because I was a binge eater and could eat, 3,000 calories in a sitting. And so I was definitely, and I ate in spite of knowing what it was doing to me, or in spite of doctors telling me you're getting too fat, So that's really what happens is when somebody, does it beyond, just an occasional thing. That's really when it gets people into trouble.
I see. Is that what you mean? What people mean when they say, "Oh man, I wanted some comfort food today because I was stressed"?
Yeah, and it is, I mean, it's again, that everybody does it, right? Like that's why we want cookies, that's why we want something that is perhaps comforting from our, reminiscent of our childhood, our mother's love or whatever. So that is comfort eating, is emotional eating. It's just a matter of, really two qualifiers: control, like how much control does somebody have to just do it and stop, and how much, is it, are they amassing consequences from it? So control and consequences are really what you want to look at, in terms of determining how far, how much it affects somebody. And I actually have a quiz on my website where somebody can learn where they are on the spectrum, to determine kind of, whether they're a food addict or an emotional eater. But yeah, everybody does it, and it can get a hold of you, to where it's more like an addiction, kind of like alcohol and the alcoholic.
You have a good point. That's because I see that sometimes with people. They're addicted to sugar, for example, right? It could be
Yeah.
anything, to breads or donuts, whatever. So can you tell us a few signs, easy signs for us as individuals to see if you do have a food issue or an emotional eating issue?
Sure. First thing is the obsession. Okay. So, which is a classic sign of addiction. If you have the obsession with it, like it preoccupies your mind, like I would think about food all the time. Like I'd be at work and I'd be thinking about what I'm going to eat when I get off of work, or what I'm going to eat Friday night watching my favorite TV show, or, it was just like planning it, thinking about it, kind of feeling preoccupied with it when you're with people that you love. That was really hard for me. Like I'd be with people I love, but I wasn't really present. My mind would be off thinking what I'm going to eat when I'm done with this, gathering. So, or if I'm at a function, how do I eat what I really want to eat without looking like I'm doing that? Like without looking like I'm a little, going overboard. So very much an obsession, but not only with food, but also with weight. So I was very obsessed with my weight. As I said earlier, I hated, my fat on my body. I just hated it. I wanted to cut it off, so very violent thoughts towards my body, always trying to exercise it off. Or if I'd binge, I'd think about vomiting. I wasn't able to do that, thankfully. But this very, harsh thoughts about my body. And so that often goes along with the eating. But as I said, somebody doesn't have to be overweight to be an emotional eater. Like you can just be a normal weight. So the food obsession is one thing. And as I also mentioned, that feeling out of control is another, like never wanting to stop, like eating something ooey gooey and chewy and just wanting to keep going, and often keep going to the point of feeling sick. Like that's certainly not our intention. Like I'm going to eat until I feel disgusting. like nobody ever says that. But when you start eating and you don't want to stop, and you end up going overboard, it's a terrible feeling. You feel stuffed, you feel sick, you pass out on the couch, you don't want to be with your friends, you feel bloated, and so those negative consequences again, that makes it really hard. So those are signs also of the addiction part of it as well. So these are some things that people can look out for: the obsession, the going overboard, losing control, and again, also having, a weight issue on account of it, or having health issues like autoimmune issues because you're eating the wrong foods, diabetes, prediabetes, heart condition. There's a lot of metabolic syndrome. There's a lot of consequences to eating too much or eating the wrong foods. And somebody, a myth is that you have to be a binger in order to be an emotional eater, but you don't. You can just be somebody who always is drawn towards the sugar, towards the carby foods, and that those are emotional choices as well. Even if you keep it within bounds, if you'd much rather always eat potatoes rather than broccoli, or a banana instead of an apple, anytime it's a heavier, starchier, sugary foods, those are often emotional choices.
And the interesting point of this as well is when it comes to sugar specifically, you brought up the topic, there's a physical addiction as well. It tastes so good. And the brain physically, I mean, the neurochemistry makes your body craving more sugar. It seems that it's a vicious cycle that people are stuck in, right?
Totally. And I am a sugar addict. Like I could not control. Once I started eating sugar, it owned me. And that is definitely, there's a big physical component to that because sugar is so highly addictive. It lights up the reward centers in our brain, and we get hooked. We want more. And you have to have more in order to get the same hooked, satisfied feeling. And, which is a classic sign of an addiction as well. So sugar is a big problem, and I always tried to moderate. Doctors will always say, oh, just moderate, just moderate the amount of sweets you have. Well, that's all well and good if you can do it. But when you're eating, when you're addicted physically, that's just impossible, and so you feel like a loser, when doctors are like, oh, it's so easy, just moderate. Well, they don't understand emotional eaters are typically physically addicted and emotionally addicted. The emotional addiction is huge because you can stop eating sugar and know it's bad for your body. And when you're off of it, that should be the end of it, right? If it's just a physical addiction, it's like, cool, it's out of your system. You're not drawn to it anymore physically, but the emotional addiction is still there, and so it's just not that easy because sugar has been your go-to, sugar, other kinds of comfort foods have been your go-to and really your primary source of coping with life, with problems. And so if you don't have new coping tools, you're going to go right back to the foods, because that's your primary source of like coping with life, tools for just dealing. And you have to have new, healthier ways to deal instead.
So we have one really good question from Miss Lisa. She says, I wish I could help my daughter. I'm not really sure what to say to her. Every time my daughter gets really upset if I say anything to her. So this is a good question because it's really hard to help, especially the young adults, teenagers, girls. How do you go about helping those dealing with eating disorders?
Yeah, so hard. And I'm just sorry to say, but a mother is the last person to be able to help, so it's like there's and I just know this from my personal experience and obviously from experience of helping others is that, there's a dynamic that's set up. The more the mom wants to help the daughter, and the more the daughter resists, there's this, this fight that's set up, and this rebellion that makes her go in the other direction. And so it's very hard. It's very delicate. I so feel for you, Lisa. That's a hard position to be in. Certainly, reading my book and understanding emotional eating is important. In my experience, is emotional eating can include under eating as well. And so if somebody does have a family member who perhaps is more on the anorexic side or bulimic, somebody's very controlled, it's still emotional. Like it's still driven by those underlying causes. So my book can help sort of understand the problem at a deeper level, for sure. But it's a delicate issue. And I often tell parents, address, if you have your own stuff with food, address that, like just sort of like try to work on your own stuff. And that will certainly energetically have an impact on your child. And again, I don't know exactly what's been, tried so far, but also I do try to tell parents, like, know that you can't fix your daughter, you can't fix her, and she's on her own path. And food, for I think any woman in our culture, frankly, food is an intense relationship, and it is a relationship, just like our relationship with money. It's a thing. There's power there. There's energy there. It's a relationship. It's, it's something to be, lots of trial and error to be figured out. And we learn about life through that relationship as well. So, thankfully I got help for my problem. And so many people can, but it's kind of let up the idea of I'm going to fix her because she's going to rebel, go in the other direction for sure. So just sort of, try to give it the light touch, and be a good example for her. But she's going to be going through her own, she's on her own path, of her struggles. And also sometimes kids don't care until they care, and so it's hard to get a kid to care. If she doesn't care if she's overweight, it's hard to get help for her. Like she's not going to do something until it hurts her. Like as a mom, it can hurt you, but that's not what's going to make her do something. It's when it hurts her, when she's sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's when she's actually going to do something. So in the meantime, just trying to like send her love and sort of let up on the intensity can really help.
So Lisa is replying, and she said, she asked the question, and she said she herself is really small, 112 pounds. Is that maybe why her daughter is mad at her?
Well, yeah, it doesn't help, I'm sure. I mean, I was fat growing up, and my middle sister, who went to Harvard like you did, Serge, she was like a stick. Like she was totally thin, athletic, didn't have a weight issue. And to be around that and reminded is not easy, but don't blame yourself either. You know, it's just, she's on her path. She's on her path. Of course, if you have, Lisa, if you have issues with food, you know, just know she might be doing the yin and the yang thing, you know, like easily. So again, that's why just sort of checking in with yourself in ways that you can help yourself is going to be super helpful as well. Instead of focusing on her, just put it back on you. What can you do for you? Because you could have a lot more control over what your habits are than what her habits are.
That's true. And sometimes I see that too with kids and parents, right? The kids will make it do what the mom or the dad will do. So it's important to take in charge our own life.
Yeah.
One thing I have observed more or less the 4, 5, 6 years is weight has become, I would say, an obsession for a lot of women. So how is that? How do you help coping with this? Because I mean, we look at the news, the TV, all the women, the girls are all skinny, they're all pretty, and it's really hard for a lot of people to you know what I mean? So how do you help people to be okay with themselves?
Yeah, it's an inside job, you know, and the media is never going to change. You know, looking at, you know, beautiful Photoshop photos is not going to change, and you can't get away from it. It's everywhere. It's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, it's on TV, it's in magazines. So, you know, we can't change society's obsession. But we have to change our own. So we are the only person we can do anything about. And, you know, when we get sucked into that and we see, you know, pictures on Facebook, nobody posts photos of their misery on Facebook, mm-hmm. You know, like it's always, they're posting the happy photos. But if we get hooked by that, if we think that means our lives suck, you know, we have to just start realizing this is an inside job. And I need to start, you know, really valuing myself and not having outside stimuli kind of, you know, be a reflection of who I am as a person. So, you know, as an emotional eater, I had very low self-esteem. You know, and so I would, and I was always looking outside, things outside myself to make me, you know, feel validated and valued. And again, part of my journey was to realize that I have to do that for myself, and I have to, you know, really do the things I need to do to build that self-esteem, you know, and realize I'm worthwhile no matter what's going on around me, because we can't change what happens in the world. We can only change ourselves.
That's a good point. And you did write a book. You mentioned it a few minutes ago, Heal Your Hunger. And in that book, you talk about 7 steps. Can you walk us through the steps and help us, the audience, about what we need to do as individuals?
Sure. I mean, it'd be hard to do all 7 probably within our time frame, but yeah. I'll give you a few of them. And the 7 steps are so valuable. You know, my book's on Audible also, if people want to listen to it. It's a 5-hour book. But the book really does outline, you know, things that have nothing really to do with food or weight. Okay. So it's really important to realize that diets don't work. 90% of all diets fail. And so we have to go deeper. And so the journey through the 7 steps is really starting to tune in with ourselves. The only thing around food I recommend is one of the steps called clean eating. And it's really, it's a framework, which is eating 3 meals with nothing in between. And so, and the reason for that are several. So first thing, you know, when we snack, we don't usually snack on healthy foods. Snacky foods are usually unhealthy foods. So cutting snacking out can be a big benefit just right there. But also, you know, making your meals count. Like if you only have 3 meals a day, they better be good meals, healthy meals, good protein, good vegetables, good oils, fats, but also make them happen, where it happens. So don't eat in front of the TV, don't eat standing up, don't eat in the car, put it on a plate, sit down and enjoy it. Like, be with it, know that you actually did it. So you don't, like, if you're distracted, you're like, you feel like you didn't get fed. So that's really important. But beyond that, it's important to have space between our meals, not only for our digestion, but also to start realizing and tapping into what our feelings actually are. In order to heal our hunger, we have to feel some hunger, because behind that hunger are some emotions. And when we're eating all day long, we're numbed out and we don't know what we're feeling. And you can't heal it if you don't know what it is. So this 3-meal magic is more of a tool for starting to identify emotional hunger. And then, of course, I give people tools for that. Another one of the steps is centeredness. We have to get still and quiet and start tuning in. So I give people what I call the 6 self-care success secrets. And these are tools for beginning to tune in. One of them is meditation. Another is prayer. And another is writing. These are things that can start helping us get acquainted with ourselves. Because as emotional eaters, we're so out of touch. It's like we decided feelings were too burdensome. They're too much. We don't want to deal with them. So we're just going to eat all the way through them. So we have to start realizing, hey, it's not so bad to feel uncomfortable feelings. Like, they're not going to kill us, which I had this sort of high alert on, anything uncomfortable certainly was going to kill me. But to start getting acclimated to various emotions and realize emotions come and go. There's a flow to them. They're not good or bad. Oftentimes we judge them. We judge our thoughts and we judge our feelings, and we have to just sort of make peace with them and realize that they're just feelings. Like, they're not going to kill us. We're not going to kill somebody else over them. Like, if we have good, productive, healthy tools for dealing with our emotions, then we can let them pass without reacting to them by stuffing them with food.
Thank you for that. And someone is asking, where can you get the book?
You can go to my website, healyourhunger.com. That's HEAL, healyourhunger.com. And this is the book right here. There's a link to Amazon. So it's on Amazon, or Audible. You can get the Audible version as well.
Good, thank you. One of our listeners is asking this really interesting question is, can you talk a little bit more concretely, specifically a patient that you work in the past with her, and try to help people to understand how you work with emotional eating?
Sure. Yeah. I work with lots of women around the globe with this problem, and I do it mostly in groups, because as emotional eaters, we tend to think we're the only ones who do what we do with food. Okay. We're the only ones who struggle. And when I get my clients together, instead of doing one-on-one, I do some one-on-one coaching, but it's mostly in groups through Zoom, and it's like so comforting to see other faces and people who have had the same struggles, to realize how universal this problem is, that we're not the only ones who have thought the crazy things we've thought or done the crazy things we've done. It's very soul filling. And part of, what fuels emotional eating is isolation, a sense of isolation and loneliness, so to be in community, realize we're not the only ones, to be around other people like us is very healing of the heart, but I also have modules online. So I have videos, there's classes, so videos and homework assignments and things that can help us sort of drop in and tap in with our emotions. We have a private Facebook group where everybody shares their wins and asks for support. That's super fun. We have office hours where if somebody's struggling, they can call in and get support. So a lot of support to help people really heal, but helping people really identify and heal the underlying causes and start to really gain in self-confidence, is a huge part and benefit of what I do. And again, we're not focusing on food and weight because, most people aren't stupid. Like, they know, they have a general idea of what they're supposed to be eating. They just can't follow through with it, And so I'm teaching people new habits As I said, the self-care habits and, communication is so important because so much of the time we stuff instead of expressing ourselves. And so learning how to speak up for ourselves is a big part of the program, learning how to create boundaries on our time, and just sort of stand for ourselves. We've been for so long putting other people first. We're big people pleasers. Emotional eaters are big people pleasers. And so we have to kind of really scale that back and start really, realizing that self-care isn't selfish, that we have to put ourselves first. It's like putting your oxygen mask on first on the airplane, and then you're much more available to help other people. So that's a big part of this, is really just people starting to value themselves and realize they're worth putting first.
Awesome. Thank you. That was really well said. So as a final note, what can you tell our listeners? How do you encourage them if they have any food issues? Because it's really common. So what would be the first thing or first step to do for them?
Yeah, well, I certainly want to suggest, obviously, that you reach out and don't do it alone. This is the hardest, food addiction is the hardest of all addictions to overcome because you have to eat. You can't put the plug in the jug like you can with alcohol. So making sure you don't try to do it alone is so, so important. Also, slowing down. It's a hard thing for emotional eaters to do because overeaters are overdoers. We love to be busy. We love to pack our schedule of things, but then that creates stress. That creates stress and overwhelm, which creates overeating. So slowing down is so important. And also I will just say, as a very practical tip, stop skipping meals. Stop skipping meals. You're not going to hack the system. You're not going to lose weight that way. You'll always end up gaining weight because your body's going to get pissed off and say, hey, we deserve to be fed, and we always end up, when we skip meals, we're thinking, oh, we're going to hack the system. But actually we end up overeating later in the day. It just doesn't pay off. Treat yourself like you would your sweet little daughter, you wouldn't say, hey, we're going to skip a meal and lose some weight. You're going to feed her 3 times a day. So just treat yourself like you would, your precious one. And that's so, so important.
Good. Thank you. So how can people reach out to you?
Sure. I have a podcast, which is called the Heal Your Hunger Show. And I share a lot from my personal experience on that show, and have, experts on as well. And I also have my Instagram channel, which is Tricia Nelson _ at the end of the N. I have a quiz on my website, which I recommend people start with, actually. The quiz is an emotional eating quiz where you find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. And that's on my website, which is healyourhunger.com.
Good. Thank you, Tricia, for your time. That was really good. That was so fast, but really good information, good questions. So it is a really important topic. And unfortunately, it's a little bit taboo. People don't really talk about it.
I know.
But it's so important.
Yeah.
You will have to come back on the show and talk a little bit more about what you do.
I would love to.
Thank you. We'll appreciate your time, and have a good rest of the day to all of you guys.
Thanks so much. Great to be here.